Have you ever heard of crop circles? Crop circles are large circular patterns typically made by flattening crops. These are usually crops like corn, barley, and oats, and they're made in crop fields overnight, hence the name. When one is discovered, they're reported in tabloids, and often many people, sometimes hundreds, will come and wander around the fields amongst the crop circles and take pictures. Some places in England are tourist destinations. You can make a whole experience out of it. There are bus companies that will drive you around to all the crop circles. If you happen to be a farmer and a crop circle appears in your field, you'll probably get a lot of attention. Crop circles tend to show up on a Saturday morning, they're never announced, and no one claims to have made them. They're always discovered. The patterns are so big that you can't really see them unless you're looking down on them from a big hill or a helicopter. They're often 30 to 60 feet across, sometimes bigger, and the whole situation is very intriguing and mysterious. People have discovered old writings that seem to describe crop circles, but there are few, if any, pictures. It wasn't until the 1970s when the number of reports of crop circles seemed to increase drastically. Naturally, everybody wants to know how the hell they got there. Well, everybody and their dog seems to have an opinion, and the reasons run the gamut of sources. We have more mundane causes like animals, or the more extreme sounding causes like Gaia or God or fairies or aliens. Some explanations even involve CIA cover-ups. There are books claiming that crop circles come from ancient humans, and others saying that they emit energy that we can detect. Some scientists have studied crop circles and tried to come up with explanations like strange whirlwinds or ball lightning. Other scientists thought they might be caused by plasma physics or the Earth's magnetic field. Frankly, I'm surprised I didn't hear anybody talk about quantum physics. Oh, that's right, they did. As I was reading about the different explanations for where crop circles came from, two themes started to emerge. One, that aliens seem to be a very popular explanation, and two, that these could definitely not have been caused by humans. Many people, laypersons, scientists, and researchers alike, claim that these patterns were far too complex to be caused by humans. I think it must have been fun to try to guess where the crop circles came from. I would love to see one in person. Out of the pictures I've seen, I think many of them are quite pleasing and marvelous to look at. Although when I showed my 6-year-old, he took a look at the pictures, then he looked at me and he just said, "These nuts." I think it's fun to imagine how they were made. If we're being serious for a moment, we have to recognize that there is almost no scientific research on the topic. And I think if you ask an honest person where crop circles come from, many of them would have to say, "I don't know." Thousands of people are claiming with very high confidence that they know exactly where crop circles came from and how they were made. They're making tenuous connections to things like the face on Mars, ghosts, and the Knights Templar. We have to understand that there is absolutely no evidence for any of these claims. None. Tabloid newspapers like to report on crop circles, as you can imagine. In fact, many years ago, it got quite competitive. So much so that many years ago, a tabloid newspaper named the Daily Mirror paid a farmer and his son to secretly make some crop circles in the hopes of tricking a rival tabloid, the Daily Mirror, into reporting on them. The trick didn't work, but it makes you wonder. Because of the tabloid trick, we know that some crop circles were definitely made by people. And it makes you wonder, could you make crop circles with just some regular people and some simple everyday tools? Okay, so let's apply a little skepticism here. So first, what exactly is skepticism? Well, skepticism means that our default is to not believe. Furthermore, we try to not believe something until we have sufficient evidence to believe that thing. And lastly, the crazier the claim, the more evidence we need to be convinced that that claim is true. So if someone asks us, So say, do you believe in horoscopes? We just answer, I don't know, or I don't believe that. So how can we apply skepticism to crop circles? Let's say there are two ways. The first is straightforward, the second is a little more subtle. First, show me the money. In other words, people like to come up with all sorts of crazy explanations for crop circles, but they provide no evidence. The crop circles are the evidence, they might say. No, that's not evidence, that's circular reasoning. In other words, it's a tautology. A tautology is something that proves itself. That's not evidence. We need something better. We need something like a picture or video evidence recording of a crop circle being made. Second, the more subtle way to use skepticism is that we must vet all of our possible solutions. Now this is a little bit difficult because people often say things like, anything is possible. So they'll listen to any corny idea. Well, anything is not possible. Likewise, when people come up with explanations for something they don't understand, they tend to use the opposite of skepticism. They'll come up with an idea for an explanation, and then they'll hold on to that idea until they're proven wrong. Sometimes even longer. A true skeptic will understand that we have to show that each one of these proposed explanations is even possible before we can include it in our group of candidate explanations. For example, someone proposed that ghosts cause crop circles, but we have no evidence that ghosts even exist, so we cannot include them amongst our candidate explanations. If you've made it this far, outstanding. Now back to the crop circle story. Crop circles are a cautionary tale. Some people dedicated many years of their life to studying crop circles. Now this is where the poor soul, Pat Delgado, enters the story. Pat was a retired engineer and a crop circle researcher. At one point, as the popularity of crop circles grew, Pat stood near a crop circle and said, and I quote, "This is without a doubt the most wonderful moment of my research. No human could have done this." So Pat was looking at this new crop circle that it had just formed in this place in England called Seven Oaks. It was a more complex crop circle than what he had seen before. There was this central circle and all of the stalks were bent down and pressed down in a clockwise fashion. There were these radiating beams from it, and there was a half circle, and there were some other features of it. At this point, Pat had been doing research on crop circles for a long time and was even making a living on it. He spent a lot of time writing about them. In fact, he co-authored a book called Circular Evidence with Colin Andrews, another crop circle researcher. In person and in his book, Pat says that crop circles were created by a superior intelligence, most likely extraterrestrial. Their book had sold more than 50,000 copies at the time. Personally, I think that is the most brilliant title for a book on crop circles I could ever imagine. From a reasoning perspective, you definitely need circular evidence. It's ironic, and I couldn't have picked a better title if I tried. So poor Pat had never heard of Occam's razor. Let me tell you about that. Occam's razor is a philosophical or scientific principle. It says that when faced with competing explanations, the one with less complexity is the one that's preferred. So Occam's razor is actually a principle that's used very often in philosophy, in science, and even in day-to-day decision-making. Pat's reverie would be short-lived. Enter Doug and Dave. The same person who told Pat about the Seven Oaks crop circle, a reporter from the London tabloid Today, introduced him to two painters, David Chorley, 62, and Douglas Bauer, 67. They had created the Seven Oaks Circle while the tabloid reporter watched. In fact, the duo had just revealed that for the past 13 years, they have been sneaking around southern England at night like goofy old commandos, fashioning as many as 25 to 30 new circles each growing season. But it turns out they decided it was time to let the cat out of the bag. They explained step by step how they made their circles. They used shockingly simple tools like planks and ropes to tamp down their crops. They used a little wire attached to a hat to help them make structures in a really straight line. Indeed, Dave and Doug even began signing their art with 2 Ds. As you can see, Doug and Dave were pranksters in addition to artists. They loved to kick a wasp nest and watch how furious and angry they got while they were buzzing around, mindlessly angry. For example, when they read in a tabloid that a local meteorologist had explained the crop circles with a whirlwind that would always go in a clockwise fashion, they made plans that their next crop circles would go in a counterclockwise fashion, and then they sat back and watched as people tried to figure out how that could be possible. Doug and Dave especially loved to hear when someone would say no mere human intelligence could have come up with these designs. When Pat saw the amazing Seven Oaks crop circle in the 1980s, it was the latest of hundreds of crop circles that had appeared in the grain fields of southern England, and in lesser numbers in the fields of 20 other countries during the past 13 years. Dave and Doug's artistic prank had inspired copycats. It was probably fun. You can barely blame them. So Doug eventually said to Pat in the field there in Seven Oaks, "I'm afraid we've been having you on." As you can imagine, Pat was crushed. "We have all been conned," he said. "If everything you say is true, I'll look the fool." Indeed. To add insult to injury, Doug and Dave dreamed the whole thing up years and years ago as an idea for how to fool the local UFO people because they thought they would believe anything. They dreamed it up over a stout at their local pub, the Percy Hobbs. So there you have it. That is the life cycle of one of the biggest and most long-standing pranks in the world. People are often trying to sell you shit that you don't need, and when they figure out that you probably wouldn't buy it from them if you knew the truth, then they'll try to manipulate you, and it won't be obvious. Don't make it easy for them. Being good at skepticism will make it much less likely that you will fall prey to something like this. So something interesting about skepticism is that it's everyone's default position to not believe. That's where you start. You start as a skeptic. You can't believe something if you don't know about it, and you can't believe something if you don't understand it. It's only when you start to learn about something and start to understand it when you can decide when and if you want to believe it. Don't let anyone pressure you into believing something. So keep in mind what we didn't learn today. We did not learn that all crop circles are made by humans. That is another claim that has to be demonstrated. We did learn that all claims have a burden of proof. We definitely learned that it's quite easy for humans to make crop circles, and people will go a long way for a prank. And thank goodness for that.
Can just walk into a cornfield and see some flattened corn and make all this out of it over the years. I mean, we're astounded as anyone else.
We used to laugh, we used to talk to each other when we're doing this, but all it is flattened corn. If you walk in, you flattened it. The only difference was the shapes.
If you learned a little bit more about skepticism today and how to be a better skeptic, then you learned how to believe as many true things as possible and as few false things as possible, and that is a valuable skill indeed. Skepticism is a valuable skill. If you want to learn more about skepticism and other valuable life skills, well, it turns out I've done all the research and all the work for you. Just go to Citizenz of Earth, that's Citizenz with a Z.com, and sign up and be a member. There is a link in the description. Citizenz of Earth is an educational organization that provides science-driven, on-demand courses for the most important skills in life. We focus on skills like skepticism, resilience, self-care, relationships, communication, finance, and ethics and morals. All skills that science has shown contribute to more fulfilling lives. Do you know any stories of some strange phenomena that ended up having a really simple explanation in the end? If so, I'd love to hear about it. Please put it in the comments. And remember, at Citizenz of Earth, we say, talents are built, not born. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.